Hello, FinOps Summit Canada. My name is Marie Burke. I'm Director of Product Marketing at Turnery, and I'm excited to present today 5 ways to achieve cloud cost savings. A little bit about me before I get started. I've been in the data and cloud management space for over 10 years, starting my career at NetApp, focused on the on-command management suite and the backup to cloud product. In the last 7 years, I've spent in the cloud cost management and FinOps space, initially starting with Cloud Health Technologies, going through the acquisition into VMware, and I recently left after the acquisition of Broadcom. And now I'm at Turnery, a multi-cloud FinOps platform. And I'm a member of the FinOps Foundation Code of Conduct Committee, FinOps certified practitioner, as you'll see here on this slide. And just a quick plug for the FinOps Foundation. If you haven't looked into the FinOps community yet, highly recommend you do so. There's a wealth of knowledge there and great networking opportunities. So definitely check out finops.org if you have a chance. And let's dive into the agenda for today. I'm going to cover the difference between cost management versus FinOps, get into some savings expectations and realities, go into the 5 ways as indicated in the title of this session, and then wrap up with FinOps maturity and a quick overview of Turnery. So starting with cost management and FinOps, a lot of folks use these terms interchangeably. So you'll hear cloud cost management, cloud financial management, FinOps, but I really see these as two distinct practices. Cost management has been around much longer, of course, and it's really more of a siloed and reactive approach. Typically, a mandate comes in to go reduce costs, and it's really tactical. Whereas FinOps was born just around the time of the pandemic, a few years back now, and it's focused on collaboration and communication across departments. And so you see many more stakeholders come into play here with FinOps across finance, procurement, even sustainability, ITAM. There's a whole breadth of personas now. And the emphasis isn't on cost savings. And now I will say cost savings is still important. It's important to many organizations. And of course, it's the topic of today's session. But FinOps is really about maximizing the business value of cloud. So not about saving money for your organization, although that's a great benefit. It's really about helping your organization make money based on your cloud investments. So I want to quickly go over expectation versus reality. From my experience, I've seen, many practitioners and prospects come to us saying, hey, I'd love to see, upwards of 40% in savings. And typically the drivers behind this are either the economic climate or perhaps a team overshot their budget and there's a mandate to go reclaim those costs elsewhere. Or perhaps a team wants to reinvest in a new strategic initiative, and so they need to go find that savings in order to do that project. And so as you talk to folks, sometimes there's an expectation of, I can decrease my cloud costs, I can reduce, I can save, and that's great. But then I think many folks in their head get that picture on the left of, okay, our cloud investment's declining. And quite honestly, I just haven't seen that in the most recent years. And so the reality really is on the right-hand side here, where folks are saving, perhaps an average of 30 to 40%, for some, key tactics, low-hanging fruit activities, investment in commitments. And then they're reinvesting that savings over time. So if you imagine, these two charts are representing more of a cost history report over time, the trend line isn't going down. It's in fact, a little more stable. Perhaps there are some peaks and valleys, but no one is seeing a drastic decline in their cloud spend. And so I just want to call that out early on as some expectation setting here. The 5 ways I'm going to cover today, these aren't the only 5 ways to save money in the cloud, but these are some of the more popular ones. A few not noted here would be things like lights on, lights off, or bill validation. But today I want to cover, pricing agreements, zombie infrastructure, right-sizing resources, commitment-based discounts, re-architecting, and modernization. And then as a bonus here, I want to mention anomaly detection because there's a lot of savings to be had through cost avoidance as well. Let's start with pricing agreements. Each cloud provider has different licensing and volume mechanisms for procuring services. Many of these are targeted more towards larger enterprises, although other companies can take advantage as well. In some cases, these private pricing agreements, as they're often referred to, involve NDAs. And so you'll see here, Microsoft, Amazon, Google each have their own verbiage and terminology when it comes to these agreements and what goes into them. And so for each of these slides, as I go through the savings tactics, I do want to call out the key stakeholders that are involved. Again, this may not be an all-inclusive list of key stakeholders, but the ones that, I feel are most impactful to this individual technique. And so key stakeholders while you're negotiating the pricing agreements, of course, you need engineering and FinOps team involved. And so if your FinOps team is a small team of one or, multiple people running that FinOps team, you will want them involved to understand the current, cloud usage and cost trends, as well as the expectations and forecasts for future projects. Procurement and finance are really important for this area here. You'll want to bring them into the fold because these agreements are worth a significant amount of money. And with that being said, you'll also need your executive buy-in and understanding of what these agreements entail. And so it's important as you go through your FinOps practice that you'll want to track your adherence to these agreements over time. And so perhaps that comes in the way of a burn down report. And so you're starting with that total commitment and tracking how it's consumed over time. Or perhaps you're looking at it more from a forecasting angle of, okay, this is how much we've spent today, and this is where we need to get to satisfy that agreement. And so while these agreements can be very beneficial to the company, you also don't want to leave wasted money on the table either. So very important to manage these over time. Second tactic, eliminating zombie infrastructure. I'm not sure if you've heard of the term of zombie infrastructure or not. So essentially just idle, unused, unattached services that are still incurring costs in your environment. And so could be, unattached volumes, old snapshots, things of that nature. And really, these are immediate savings opportunities, quick wins, where you may often hear the term low-hanging fruit. So it's a great way to get some waste removed from the environment. And in fact, the State of FinOps 2024 report that is published by the FinOps Foundation came out this year and indicated that reducing waste is the top priority for many practitioners. And so this is just one of those ways to reduce that waste. And key stakeholders here, there can be some debate on this. Of course, folks in your finance department and your executive team will want to see the savings benefit that come from eliminating zombie infrastructure. But I really just focus on engineering and the FinOps team here, because those are the teams that are going to be directly hands-on involved with this type of activity. And so, the FinOps team perhaps may be the one that identifies the opportunity for savings, and then the engineering team goes and acts on that. Going hand in hand, these are all often grouped together as part of workload optimization or usage optimization, is right-sizing resources. And so across your services, whether that's compute, Kubernetes, databases, you'll want to track that resource utilization. And you also want to take into consideration any upcoming changes in demand. For example, you might want to leave a little extra headroom if you know of an important initiative that is being spun up, or if you're expecting more traffic to your application. A good example of that would be, Black Friday for a retail organization. You need to make sure that the infrastructure you have in place is ready to scale for the demand that is expected. You'll want to evaluate these performance metrics. So depending on the resource, there will be different performance metrics you want to look at, CPU, memory, disk, network, and so on. And you want to set thresholds, or some would say efficiency targets. So, what is considered underutilized to your organization? And this may be specific by company. Perhaps you think anything under 30% CPU is underutilized, or perhaps anything under 15% is underutilized. So really based on your applications and your business demands, you'll want to set those parameters so you know what is appropriate for right sizing. And then taking into account, are you right sizing within the same instance family? Do you want to right size with, cross-family recommendations? There are, tools and platforms in the space that can help you do that. And similarly to the zombie infrastructure activity, key stakeholders here again, engineering and FinOps teams, really the teams that, again, will be hands-on with the technique. That brings us to the third tactic here, purchase and manage commitments. So commitment-based discounts, there are many different flavors of this with each cloud provider. So you may have heard of reserved instances, savings plans, committed use discounts, sustained use discounts, spot instances, VMs, preemptible spot instances, VMs. And so what's really important here is the purchase and manage of the commitments, emphasis on and. These aren't just set it and forget it activities. Very similar to a right sizing effort, you want to track the usage of these over time because, some of these commitments can be flexible. So for example, with, Amazon EC2 convertible reserved instances, if those reserved instances are underutilized, you could exchange them based on certain attributes, instance type, for example, OS, tenancy, and then that way you can benefit from that discount. And so this falls under rate optimization per the FinOps Foundation framework. And what's really great is some of these discounts can, claim upwards of 70% savings compared to on-demand prices. So really definitely want to look into this if it's not something you've explored already. A lot of savings to be had. I'm personally of the mindset to right size before you reserve. That is a topic up for debate among some folks in the community. So curious to hear your thoughts on that. And key stakeholders involved. And so this one, I brought back in finance and procurement and the executive team because these commitments can have a significant expense to them. Typically they are, 1 year or 3-year term commitments. And if you're purchasing in bulk, depending on your RI coverage, for example, some organizations like to have, close to 60, 70% of their infrastructure covered by reservations. And so you'll want to involve those teams to make sure, the funding is available, you're negotiating properly, and you have that executive buy-in. But again, FinOps team will help manage these commitments over time alongside engineering as well. That brings us to re-architecting applications. In the FinOps framework, this is referred to as architecting for cloud. You'll also hear of architecture modernization. And some key considerations here, your migration strategy. Are you still migrating workloads over to the cloud? Were your applications built in the data center, or were some of your applications built in the cloud? Perhaps you have a mixed bag. And regarding your cloud strategy, are you all in on one cloud? Are you multi-cloud? And if you are multi-cloud, what is that breakdown among the cloud providers? For example, are you 90% in AWS and just keeping 10% in another cloud for testing purposes or backup and recovery purposes? Or are you more evenly distributed across clouds and really honing in on the ability to take advantage of pricing negotiations and agreements across clouds? And some of this may be dependent on, whether your company has gone through any mergers and acquisitions. Some folks are multi-cloud by choice, and others become multi-cloud once, two organizations come together and they realized, organization A had a heavy investment in Azure and organization B had a heavy investment in Google. So definitely important to consider, the cloud strategy, the migration strategy, and especially if you lifted and shift or partial refactoring of applications, all of this will come into play. And so re-architecting applications is one of those cost savings techniques that is very specific to each organization. There is no clear recipe for success here. You do really have to roll up your sleeves and dig into your data and also your strategy to understand what your options are. And that leads into the deployment model. Are you containerizing applications? Are you investing in serverless technologies? So on and so forth. There are a lot of different technologies out there that your organization could take advantage of. And of course, there are more recent trends with AI and what is your investment there? And are you trying to look at certain workloads in that regard? And as we all know, each cloud provider has many services to choose from: compute, database, data warehouse, Kubernetes. And so it can be a bit overwhelming to decide, which service is right for your application. Especially again, if you are in a multi-cloud environment, you might want to consider, Google BigQuery versus database with another cloud provider. It's really up to your organization and your infrastructure. But with this technique, you really do need to be prepared to make trade-offs. Security, performance, cost are ones, of course, that you'll come up regularly against, but reliability, sustainability is becoming more active in the conversation, especially internationally. A lot of folks are invested in sustainability. North America is typically trending a bit behind in that regard, but we expect to see that, becoming more prevalent in the future. There's also some data around that in the State of FinOps report for 2024. Key stakeholders here, I specifically called out cloud and enterprise architects. And that's not to say that cloud and enterprise architects can't be involved in any of the other techniques. In fact, I've seen in the past that this role can often be found within the FinOps team or as part of a broader cloud center of excellence. But the cloud and enterprise architects really need to be involved in this architectural modernization activities. So really, it's their job, it's their bread and butter here. Now, of course, they need to work hand in hand with engineering and the FinOps team. And it's important to call out that finance, procurement need to be involved here because there is a cost impact. So yes, you might have a cost savings by re-architecting your applications, but you also might want to renegotiate some agreements with your cloud provider when those come up, to get those benefits. And so that's why it's important to involve some of those teams to really make sure you're maximizing the value of your investments and the agreements that you have in place. And again, you may need to get executive buy-in and support for a project of this magnitude as well. And that brings us to the bonus tip here, cost avoidance with anomaly detection. I've seen anomalies cost companies, thousands of dollars in just a few days. And, those could quickly spiral out of control if not caught in a timely manner. What, costs $1,000 in a few days could easily be, $30,000 by the end of the month. And you can imagine the scale of that depending on the anomaly in play. And so it's really important to take a proactive approach to anomaly detection. Sometimes there are irregularities, unexpected changes in spend. And if you don't have any tooling in place or mechanisms for alerting you of that anomaly, it can be very costly to your business in the end. So being able to react quickly is paramount, and identifying the root cause of the anomaly. It's great to get the alert and be able to react to it. But if you don't know what the root cause is, then you can't prevent it from happening again. Some key stakeholders that are involved here: engineering, FinOps teams, finance as well, because an anomaly could quickly help make sure you overshoot your budget for a given quarter or period, whatever cadence you're measuring against. And so very important to identify, what is happening in your environment. And executives, unfortunately, a very large scale anomaly could have a drastic impact on the business, and you will need to inform your executives in that case. And no one wants to go up to their CTO or CIO and say, hey, there was a $40,000 anomaly that impacted us, for XYZ reason. And so it's definitely a great opportunity to avoid cost impacts. So not necessarily a savings technique, but more of a cost avoidance. And that brings us to the FinOps maturity cycle. Again, this is from the FinOps Foundation in terms of the phases of crawl, walk, and run. And per the FinOps philosophy, each capability and technique can span across each of these phases of maturity. And what I've put together here is where I think this technique may be most impactful in terms of savings within your organization. So a great place to get started is those pricing agreements with the cloud providers. enterprise agreements, EDPs, so on, and Google commits. And so taking advantage of those agreements early on can have a great savings impact. So that's something that can be done in the crawl phase. Eliminating zombies, I consider that to be low-hanging fruit. I definitely think it's something that could happen early on. Some folks would place this more of the walk phase, but I think if you have, the reporting in place and the understanding of what is, sitting idle in your infrastructure, you can definitely, take advantage of, zombies and terminating those, perhaps, in the crawl phase or early on in the walk phase. Right-sizing commitment management, again, going back to an earlier comment I made, I'm of the mind to right-size before you reserve. Not everyone takes that approach. So commitments is starred here for that reason. I have seen, reports similar to this that indicate, commitments can be very advantageous in more of a crawl state. I have it here in walk because I think, right sizing and then reserving those commitments can be beneficial to an organization. So that's why it's in the middle here. Anomaly detection, again, going into that cost avoidance. Now, this can be as simple as alerting on anomalies. It could be a manual effort, which would be more of the crawl phase of, proactively logging into a system to see if there was an anomaly, or can involve automated actions and remediation, which could lean more towards a run phase. I have it straddling walk and run here. As your company becomes more mature in your FinOps practice, and perhaps grows your cloud investment, monitoring for anomalies and managing them effectively will be key to your organization and avoiding any drastic increases in costs. And then lastly, re-architecting. This really is more of a run state activity and capability. It does require a significant investment from the organization. It may temporarily detract from other projects and initiatives that are going on, put them on pause, so to speak. But it can yield significant amount of savings depending on the approach that is taken. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend re-architecting too early on in your journey. Again, depends on your migration strategy, your cloud strategy, and so on. But it is definitely a very big undertaking that should be considered if your organization is looking to achieve a significant amount of savings. And to wrap, I went through, 5 different ways to save in the cloud. And really, it's very beneficial to have a multi-cloud FinOps platform to help you with these techniques and capabilities. If you go to, the FinOps Foundation website, you'll see that there's an entire landscape of tools out there that can help you, from tools that have been around for a decade or so that have been in the cloud cost management space and focus on that savings reduction tactic, to the new, FinOps native platforms, as we'd call them, Ternary being one of those. Platforms that have FinOps framework ingrained into their DNA and their purpose built for FinOps and maximizing the value of your investment. But then there's also tools that operate in a more niche capacity, perhaps focused specifically on Kubernetes or on automated commitment management. So definitely a lot of opportunity in the landscape here. It's important to find a tool that not only helps you from a technology standpoint, but also from a people and process standpoint. Again, the main distinction between cost management and FinOps that I referred to early on in the presentation is that FinOps is really intended to be a collaborative approach, and it's a cultural practice. So definitely something to consider as you are evaluating potential tools and partners as you move forward. A little bit about Ternary. Ternary is a FinOps native platform, premier member of the FinOps Foundation. We're an active contributor to the focus group, and we are a FinOps certified platform. To date, manage more than $7 billion in cloud spend under management. This is a very typical stat that you will see from many companies in this space. Depending on the size and scale of the company, this will vary, but $7+ billion cloud spend under management for a company like Ternary is a really great, strong start and statistic here. And one thing I want to call out as noted earlier in the presentation as well, I came from Cloud Health. Many of my colleagues at Ternary have also come from other companies in the space, such as Cloudability. And we have a small team currently, but together we have more than 100 years of combined experience in this market. So we've learned from our past, and we're building a platform to really help customers and partners thrive and successfully grow their FinOps practices. And lastly, I'll just call out that we are receiving analyst recognition and being noted for our ability to scale and perform. And so with that, just want to again say, you may already have a tool in place. You may be evaluating tools. According to the state of FinOps, most organizations have an average of about, I think it was 4.1 tools. So definitely take a look at the tools already available at your disposal. Take a look at the capabilities. Now, it's very important to map your business needs and pain points to the capabilities that a given tool or platform offers. Many of these platforms have different strengths and can help you with different use cases. So really just do your due diligence and figure out which platform is best for your organization. And with that, I want to thank you for listening to today's presentation. I'm more than happy to connect with folks on LinkedIn and would love to hear your feedback. So don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you so much, and good luck with the rest of your FinOps journey.